Welcome to Module 9 of the Documentation of Contract Quantities class. We are going to finish up our discussion of the Documentation Guide, Section A, with paid by weight tickets and final documentation. Paid by weight items. Where have you seen one of these stickers before? I'm going to guess if you have a gasoline or diesel powered vehicle, you've probably seen one on the gas pump. This is a decal from the Department of Agriculture indicating a unique decal number that the Department of Agriculture has checked this dispensing item, weights and measures, and when you pump a gallon of fuel, you're actually getting a gallon of fuel. They also are used for our production scales. When we get paid by weight items with a weight ticket, they must be on a scale that has been approved by the Department of Agriculture. IDOT requires a Department of Agriculture approved scale. That scale must be checked every 12-month period, so each calendar year by IDOT policy. Before accepting materials on the job site that are paid by weight tickets, we must obtain the scale information, including the decal number and certification date of that scale. You can accomplish this in a number of ways. The easiest way is call the scale, ask for their certificate letter or a copy of it. The Department of Agriculture also maintains a database online of the majority of the larger scales in Illinois, and likely your scale will be on that list. It is required that on a daily basis we have an inspector at the scale to observe the weighing of the trucks before they get loaded, or tare weights, and there is a form, the BC 1465. We will show you a copy of that next. On page F37 you can see an example of the truck tare weight recording form. Here we have some identifying number from the truck, name on the truck, tare weight, empty tare weight of the truck. Was the driver in the truck or not in the truck? How many of us have enough personnel to go to the scales early in the morning and check tare weights? Not too many. Fortunate for us, there is a workaround that is located in the dock guide. On pages A22 and 23, the bottom of 22, top of 23, the dock guide provides the definition of an automatic ticket printing system. The requirements are A, B, C, and D. What this does for us is this highlighted area on the bottom. For any weights recorded by an automatic ticket printer, no inspector will be required to witness the weighing and initial the ticket at the scale location. If tare weights or net weights are not automatically measured, then an inspector must still witness and record the tare weights. Most of our scales automatically can store these tare weights. The most important thing to remember is these tare weights should be daily, not on a weekly basis, not monthly, not for a whole year. A lot of these scale operators like to put a tare weight in for a truck and they just keep it the whole season. Well, what if that truck driver changes trailers? Is there a significant weight difference between, let's say, an aluminum trailer and a steel trailer? You betcha. If we got tare weights with the aluminum trailer at the beginning of the season and they switch to a steel trailer somewhere in the middle, that truck's going to weigh pretty heavy. We're not going to get as much material because that steel trailer is accounting for some of that weight. So daily tare weights, automatic ticket printer, then we don't have to be there to witness truck weights. We are going to collect and initial tickets at the point of delivery. So what are we doing down here in this corner on this weight ticket? We are initialing. We are initialing the tickets that we see the material being incorporated into the job, or we know with a reasonable certainty that the material from this ticket actually went into our job site. What we don't want to do is to get in the situation where we have the ghost tickets or inflated weight tickets. So here's a question for you. What if the inspector was collecting load tickets, had to leave the job site, and was not present while the tonnage material was still being delivered? What would you do? Would you go ahead and initial those tickets? Let's find out. The inspector would not initial those tickets that he or she was not present for. You should write a memo to the file, show a daily yield check to justify the total amount placed that incorporates the tickets that were not witnessed. So we would not initial those tickets, but we do a daily yield check and we can justify paying for those tickets we didn't see in that fashion. Here we have a typical material transfer device into our paver. And if you're the only person on the job, maybe you're back here in the back watching the actual rolling pattern, or you're back with the people cutting the cores or running the nuke gauge. Sometimes you're walking up and checking the trucks. You're back and forth through the day, and it is sometimes very difficult to be there to witness all the tickets. So right here in this area, we're going to key in. We've got some clipboards. There it is. We have two clipboards, 2 copies of the tickets, one for the contractor, one for the engineer. And maybe we're not there to witness all these tickets. But if I don't witness the tickets and I'm not counting trucks and I don't see each truck pull up, then I probably wouldn't initial each ticket. But if you're there paving and you're paying attention each time a truck pulls up to the paver, and every so often you count the trucks and then you count the tickets and you have the right number of tickets for the same number of trucks, well, then I might collect those tickets and I would feel comfortable to initial them. But you need to be relatively certain that the ticket represents a truck that did deliver material and it did get placed into our job site. Another important factor of paid by weight items is called the Independent Truck Weight Check Action Report, or it's our weekly random weight check for our scales. The form, the BIC 2367, we will look at in just a moment. These independent weight checks are required once per week per plant during production. So what that means is every scale that is hauling material to an IDOT contract at least once a week must have a random weight check. How is a weight check performed? On the form, it's pretty simple to follow. The top box represents the initial ticket from the production scale. So a truck goes to the facility, gets filled with its material, gets its weight ticket generated. It gets back to the job site, and before it unloads the material, we, representative of the engineer, takes that truck to an independent scale. We take it to a second Department of Agriculture approved scale and get a loaded weight. They go back to the job, they dump their material, and we get the truck to go back to the independent scale, and we have an empty weight. We then can calculate the net weight of material. In this box, there's an equation right here that allows us to calculate a tolerance. That would be a % difference between the production scale and the independent weight check scale. On page 2 of the form, we have page 2 of the Independent Truck Weight Check Action Report. Based on the results of your tolerance calculation, if you're within tolerance, you check the top box. An independent weight check was performed today and passed. No further action is required, and you can place a copy of this form in your files. If the tolerance does not meet between the production scale and the independent weight scale, you check this box. It says an independent weight check was performed today and failed. You need to complete this form and within 48 hours send it to the Bureau of Investigations and Compliance at this email. In just a moment, we will also tell you how to handle scales that are out of tolerance in accordance with these specifications. Here we have page 3 of the Independent Weight Check Report. In the event that you have a failing independent weight check and it's out of tolerance, the contractor has an option to request that you check on a second independent weight scale. Possibly that first independent weight scale was out of tolerance, and you will perform the procedure again, but you'll go to a different independent weight scale for this check. Let's look at the 2016 spec book, page 60, on independent weight checks that are out of tolerance. Here in this first paragraph, It states if you don't meet the tolerance for HMA or aggregate materials, but the contractor is actually furnishing more material than the scale tells us, we will give a copy of the independent weight check and the tolerance to the contractor, showing them that they are over delivering or delivering more than the ticket says. No adjustment in pay quantity will be made. Should the independent weight check show that the net weight of material delivered to the contract is less than is actually printed on the ticket based on the tolerances, we're going to document that. We send a copy to the contractor, and then we adjust the net weight as shown below these paragraphs, and we'll show you here in just a moment. Farther down the page, on 2016 Spec Book, page 60, we have the method for accounting for the deficiency or out of tolerance scale. The engineer will adjust the measurement for payment based on the following formulas, where A is our adjustment factor, B is the net weight shown on the delivery ticket, C is the net weight determined from the independent weight check. The factor is applied, providing an adjusted net weight. So we take our adjustment factor times the actual delivery ticket net weight. That becomes our adjusted net weight. This would be the quantity we would be paying the contractor based on the adjusted tolerance of that scale. The adjustment factor will continue to be applied to materials from this particular source scale and until it's identified and corrected by the contractor to the satisfaction of the engineer. If the cause of the deficient weight is not identified and corrected within 7 calendar days, that source must cease delivery of all materials for which the basis of payment is by weight, and that will continue until a resolution is found. On page A26 in the doc guide, some small quantities are presented. These quantities are daily and for construction, inspection, and deal with paid by weight items. For aggregates, small quantity is considered less than 500 tons per day. For HMA, less than 250 tons per day. And for bituminous materials, our prime coat and tack coat, less than 4,000 pounds per day. These are considered small quantities, and they remove some of the requirements for paid by weight items. On page A26 in the doc guide is the section titled Small Quantities. What happens? Here's our small quantities we just presented on the last screen. Less than 500 tons of aggregate, less than 250 tons of hot mix asphalt, and less than 4,000 pounds of bituminous materials per day. What does this do for us? Number one, no inspector is required to be present at the scale to witness and initial the tickets. We don't have to be at the scale. No inspector has to get tare weights for that day. And number three, no independent weight checks are required. So if you have less than these small quantities, you don't need your independent weight check. If you have above these small quantities in any given day, in any given week, you will be performing that independent weight check. Please check with your district office. Many of the districts have personnel that will perform these independent weight checks for you if you're an employee of IDOT as the resident engineer. Let's talk about final documentation. When I say final documentation, we are referencing when we're all done placing these pay items. All of the construction is done for a certain pay item, and we need to validate the entire quantity or final quantity for the contract for these pay items. It is cross-referenced at the bottom of a manual quantity book or at the top for I-Cores of the quantity book page. In CMMS, final documentation is handled as an attachment to the pay item. For final documentation, all quantities must be final measured using proper equipment, the method measured per the method in the contract, and calculated to the accuracy in the tables in section B. Cannot be estimated. Anything that we've estimated must be measured again, or a final measurement must be made. Prior to submitting your records, calculations must be checked by someone other than the person who did the original calculation. Earlier, we talked about manual initials and dates in I-Cores or manual contracts. For CMMS, they can be electronic initials and dates, but somebody has to check calculations before your quantities can be final for the project. Don't forget to look in Section D for the recommended checking procedures. Sources of final documentation. These are very similar to our field and progress source documents. Field measurement books or field books, inspectors' daily reports, when they're identified as this is the final field measurement. Cross-section paper for cross sections only. With our weight tickets, they're going to be bound and summarized with an adding machine tape. Project diary for calendar month or calendar day items. A calculation file for such items as concrete and reinforcement bars. If you have a BC 981 form or the agreement to the accuracy of planned quantity acceptance, you can use that document to substantiate your final quantity. For all force account work, your final documentation will be all of the extra work daily reports, the BC 635s, together with the final approved contractor's invoice. If you have weekly trainees on your job, they will be a pay item. You will have a weekly trainee report that will be submitted for every pay estimate. If you have weekly trainees as a pay item on your job, you can contact your district EEO office. They will get you set up and ready to go. Built according to standard and citing the standard number. We discussed those standard plans in an earlier module. The nice thing about these standard plans, they have pre-computed quantities on them, and we can extract those quantities right off of those plans, put them on our field inspection document, field book or IDR, and then you can attach a copy of the standard. Calculation spreadsheets can be used for final documentation. If we have traffic control surveillance, there's a report form, the BC 2240. We can do calculations right on that form, and we don't need a separate document. This can be our final documentation.